jokes that my mother ruined my life and turned me into a comedian. 28 years of being her daughter is to blame for my need to get on stage and make people laugh. Don't get me wrong, she was an amazing mother. She did her best because that's all she ever wanted to be. I was born 2 years after her own mother had passed away, and in the delivery room, when I arrived, she held me and said, "I got my little girl, Mom." When I hear her retell this story today, it makes me realize how important the moment was when she first met me. Between my older brother and me, my mom had her work cut out for her on Halloween 1987. She spent 4 days making an elaborate Ghostbusters costume for my older brother, and at the last minute remembered, "Oh yeah, I forgot Laura needs a costume." So as my brother's Halloween accessory, she cut a hole in a pillowcase and shoved it on my tiny body. Let me assure you, I was a ghost, not a hostage or a tiny Klansman like it may look. I was a ghost. And by the way, the hole that she cut for my face was actually on the seam of the pillowcase, so when I was done with it, she could sew it back together and actually use it again. This practical thinking in terms of linens was not so great when I spent most of the night holding the hole open to see where my tiny 2-year-old legs were walking, or rather, tripping over. My older brother stole the show that Halloween. He got a lot of candy, and I got a lot of laughs. Anytime my mom wants to tell me she loves me just as much as my older brother, I reference this photo and tell her she's wrong. When I was 8 years old, my parents moved us to a new town, and somewhere in the dynamics of being a weird little sister, a new kid trying to make friends at school, and watching Jim Carrey and Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, and too young and impressionable in age, grew this weird little spaz of a girl. I couldn't stop making funny faces or trying to make the other kids laugh. It got me into a lot of trouble with my teachers, but by then I was too addicted to the attention. I just always wanted there to be laughter. I never wanted it to stop. Not long after that came a day I felt solidified me as a comedian. It wasn't the moment I first told a joke that got laughs, or the first time I stepped on a stage. It was the moment I watched my mom realize she couldn't do it all. After having a reputation as the funny kid, I was surprised when my teacher nominated me as a creative wildcat. Wildcat being the mascot of our school, and creative being the theme of that month's assembly, wherein a few kids got to stand on stage, get a ribbon, and a random reason to feel special for the day. When I told my mom, she was super proud of me and immediately marked it on the calendar as sure not to miss it. Weeks later, the assembly came, and I searched the auditorium for my mom. I didn't see her anywhere. I stood on stage, waiting to find her in the crowd, waving at me, but by the time I got my ribbon and walked off stage, she was nowhere to be found. When she picked me up from school, she had a smile on her face, excited to see me, but said nothing about the assembly. I waited for her to explain why she wasn't there, but when no explanation came, I realized she just forgot. I remember the smile quickly leaving her face after I got in the car and said, "You forgot my assembly." She felt horrible. She held me and she couldn't stop apologizing. She wanted to be an amazing mom, but between her 2 kids and her 2 jobs, my assembly fell through the cracks somewhere. She stared at the steering wheel, mortified, and said, "I can't believe I forgot." Even at 8 years old, it hurt too much to watch. I didn't want to have to tell her she forgot. I didn't want to have to see her sad. So I made the following joke. "It's okay, Mom. They said that they would do the assembly again tomorrow for any parents that missed it today." Her sadness was broken with laughter. I just wanted there to be laughter, always. I never wanted it to stop. Eventually, this drive for laughter led me down the path of class clown, turned high school theater nerd, turned amateur stand-up comedian by the time I was 19. My mom even made it to my first stand-up show, in front row, in fact, laughing at all my jokes. So at 20 years old, I moved to Hollywood to try and make it big. But as it turns out, Hollywood comedy clubs were a devastating place for me to spend my early 20s. Night after night, I would go on stage to a dark, scary crowd where my mom wasn't laughing in the front row. In fact, no one was in the front row, and no one was laughing, period. So the newly turned 21-year-old in me would drink herself into confusion to then be hungover and riddled with anxiety the next morning at her day job. I had one friend at this day job. He had come to know me as the funny girl after I'd do things like put grocery bags on my head and answer phone calls. Hilarious, I know. But after a while, I felt the comedian in me wearing thin. One morning, in some clumsy way, I began to tell him that I was starting to question who I was. I looked at him, took a big gulp, and said, "You know, sometimes I think people know me as a comedian, and that's it. Sometimes I don't think I know the real me." And he started to laugh because he thought I was making a joke. I looked at him at the ground and said, "I'm actually telling the truth, I think." He stared back at me blankly. I know, awkward. Up until then, I had been known to everybody as the funny comedian girl. It's how I made friends. It's how I aced job interviews. It's how I functioned as me. But that was all I knew. All I knew was the little kid who got dressed up as a ghost last minute, combined with the broken-hearted little spaz whose mom forgot to show up at her assembly. It always felt like those moments were the formula for my destiny in comedy. But what else was there? Who was I? Was I really a comedian? Or was I just Linda's daughter? The truth was, after that day in the car, watching my mom's heartbreak, I didn't want to be Linda's daughter. Because I felt among all the other things going on in her life, being Linda's daughter was a burden. I was better at just making her laugh. I was better at just making everyone laugh. So that's who I became. After this self-realization, I stopped going on stage. I stopped performing. I stopped being funny. I retreated to a private, secluded corner of the internet blogosphere called Tumblr, where I chronicled all the stories that made me, me. Halloween, the assembly, my life performing on stage, all spilled onto pages of the internet to an audience of strangers who never knew me. Don't get me wrong, it was melodramatic and self-indulgent, but come on, that's what blogs are for. And it was way cheaper than therapy. Even if I didn't know my followers, I was thankful they listened and validated that part of me that knew maybe I wasn't destined just for comedy, that it was okay to just be me, Linda's daughter. Almost 2 years later, my mom sends me an email on my birthday. The first sentence reads, 28 years ago today, I had my wish come true. I got my baby girl. You are exactly what I had looked forward to my whole life. Life seemed so complete. I had my girl, my boy, and my husband, my wonderful family, the continuing joy of my life. It's so strange to look back and re-examine the things that shape the person you become, especially when the perspectives seem so different than how they first felt. I was never a burden to her like I had felt growing up, but as it turns out, that's how a comedian was born. So I constantly make jokes with my mom that she ruined my life and turned me into a comedian. There was a joke a few months ago, back when she was folding laundry. Nice pillowcase, Mom. What are you going to do with that? Cut a hole in it, shove it on a toddler so she'll eventually have her life ruined and become a comedian? I eventually got comfortable making those sorts of jokes again, and coincidentally making those sorts of jokes on stage. I got back into stand-up because I couldn't stay away. I may be Linda's daughter, but one fact remains about me, that I love laughter, and I never want it to stop. Thank you.
Laura Condi.